Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We have two outstanding poets with us today, Bill Mohr and Bart Edelman. Bill will read first, and then Bart. Bill Mohr has a PhD in literature from the University of California, San Diego, and has taught literature and creative writing at California State University, Long Beach since 2006. His literary history of various communities of poets in Los Angeles, Holdouts, was published to substantial acclaim by the University of Iowa Press in 2011. In addition to having his poems translated into Italian, Croatian, and Japanese, a bilingual volume of his poems, Probus Occultus, was published in Mexico by Bonobos Editores in 2015. His most recent collections of poems are The Headwaters of Nirvana from What Books 2018 and Displacements, which is forthcoming from Paul Vangelisi's Magra Press. Bill Mohr is an innovative, brilliant poet who transformed his life through the imagination, rigorous scholarship, and a great memory. He's been a leader in LA poetry and beyond for many decades. Bill Mohr.
Oh, hey, Harry. Thanks so much for having me on this program again. I was watching on, I guess, the YouTube a broadcast you did that included the poet Jim Mohr from Minnesota, and I was very struck by how he started his presentation with a poem of yours, the John Ford Chapel, which you so graciously allowed me to post in my blog that I do. And I thought, and Jim Mohr, of course, was one of the poets I published back in the days when I did Momentum Press along with you. So I wanted to start today with a poem that comes from a chapbook that you did, that you put together and that I published, Eros Ash. And this has always been one of my favorite short poems of yours. The Return. Who moves nude Eros prevents sleeping Aphrodite from sleeping. Compassion never forgets. Aphrodite has a castle, a thin waist in Russia. Aphrodite comes home. The nude Eros moves closer to white cows in a wheat field. November 19th, 1973. It's always a source of pleasure for me, Harry, to realize how long we've known each other as poets and cared about each other's work. And of course, cared about Holly's work too, very, very much. As I've gotten older as a poet, one of the things I've begun doing on occasion is taking a kind of classic poem and, if you will, doing a updated revision of it. In other words, imagining how it might have been written using the same topic if somebody were writing today. And of course, this involves a fair amount of audacity, right? To take a poem by, say, Dickinson or Shelley and kind of rewrite it. And this is an example of one of the ones I've been doing. In this case, it's a takeoff on Shelley's Ozymandias. I met a tour guide in a passport line who, after scrolling on his phone, looked up and said, "You got to see it for yourself. Two enormous legs of stone, lopped off at the waist, protrude from dunes that waddle toward a distant cliff. Close by, jutting from a shallow crater that once must have been an oasis at the center of a courtyard, a noseless oval of a face gawks at a pedestal's proclamation. My name is uppermost, the toast of the Euphrates. Look at my palace, you measly underlings, and fantasize, blah, 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 blah. Round the sway of that swaggering wreck, and a withering whisper The breeze whirls onward yet, a few more grains of sand. One of the things actually that was interesting is I sort of worked on this like a cover version, in a way, one of the things that I envy musicians is that they can take a song and radically kind of work with it, right? Play with it when they do a cover version. And I felt like I was sort of doing a cover version of Ozymandias and with sort of a certain amount of free jazz solo at work. But it did lead me to realize that, to sort of articulate that the theme of Shelley's poem is that human vanity is a desert. I mean, I really sort of saw into the heart of the metaphor in a way that I hadn't quite sort of so directly experienced before. And of course, it just made me appreciate what a great poem that is all over again. Sort of getting so close up to Shelley's brushwork, so to speak. So I thought today, I recently have been working on a short prose piece that I had kind of hoped to read today, but I don't think it's quite ready. It's a meditation on the filmmaker Robert Bresson, and it's only a page and a half long, but I'm hoping if I have the chance to get on your program again to read it. But so instead, I'm going to read a fairly long section of a prose poem that appears in this collection that was mentioned in the introduction, Displacements, which is forthcoming in its sort of final version this coming summer from Magra Press, Paul Evangelisti's press. Paul's been an enormous supporter of my work over the years, and I want to say thank you publicly for all of his support of my work. And so this is a piece that is called Ball of Tension, and it reflects how my writing was going some time ago. Ball of tension, the first of many, but how many? Count mounts A. The day after I shave my mustache off, I spread the foam on my cheeks and chin, but don't cover my upper lip, since while shaving, I still think it's there. Filled with yellow packets of mounted photographs, a linen hamper is pushed from behind across the street to the store's new location. Turtles crawl up an astroturf ramp to a rectangular tub of water. A bee burner jets its bullwhip. Blue gas like 7 spokes of birthday candles. Vanilla wafers in the redwoods, but how did they get there? For you all-night movie freaks, caffeinated popcorn. Wet hair of children squawking and squealing in a swimming pool. Give it to me. Give it to me. Give it to me. Thirsty ants scale one side of the pentagonal vase, white beneath red lilies and bachelor buttons. Scrub and pinion. Stellar J's wafer, a millennium. After it catches on, decaffeinated popcorn. Derek brought 3 plastic bags half filled with hamburger buns. He asked if we want to help him feed the ducks in the pond. We tear the buns into bits and hurl them over a fringe of grassy embankment 3 ducklings scoot out from under. Derek skips a bottom half of a hamburger bun across the pond between the ducks. 5 hops with a hamburger bun. He says he does it all the time, but I've never seen it done before. Use cards, 50 cents. The 12th deck free. Hammer hitting foil. Hammering garlic inside tinfoil on a breadboard above splattered kitchen floor. Like all toothed whales, the common dolphin uses echolocation, sending out clicking sounds that hit an object and bounce back as echoes. Why do I want a turquoise ring so much? I stalk a cat sleeping on the porch between the door and rocking chair. A spider rappels from the roof beam to a hibiscus bush. On the kitchen table, the yellow-brown stone I lifted from the creek bed abides in a damp bowl. Slightly spongy railroad ties trestle. The ultimate pine cone, the source of all pine cones, appears in the sky, eclipsing the sun and daylight moon. You slowly walk toward gulls clustered on sand. The flock's edge struts away. Clouds shade themselves with delicate grays and mauves. As waves pull back, tiny holes dot their withdrawal. Avocado burritos for each of us and vanilla ice cream cones. Up, high up, as high as 5 palm trees, the clock of the flock undulates, ravenous and tense. Hand whipped over strawberries. The ice chest sloshes with half-melted ice cubes. A, K-A, K-A. The root of a stunt palm is roped to a garbage bin in the alley. The limited vocabulary of a half second. Halley's Comet is visible. From where right now? To be with God on his many adventures before creation. A voice inside me reads out loud to my mind. I read as though I'm listening to the radio, each word pronounced. The voice is different, not as deep. A farewell party in a Masonic lodge. A coworker is going back to Louisiana. His right hand in a cast. He dances near picnic tables. The DJ owns the sound system. Parties hired out for fun. The masochism of the working class. I want to feed the hand that bites me. The top of the bathwater cakes sweat. A red aster wilts near an aquarium. A vase is a bicycle with a flower tied to its handlebar. You dig holes in sparse grass in front of the apartment. The roses in the front row died. Every day but Wednesday. Lifeguards widened the V of red plastic cones spreading from their tower. Justin and I riptided toward a southern tower, about face, oceans of lotion, sporadic punctuation of a rough draft, footsteps clanging on a fire escape mingle with a helicopter's throb. A hot day fades sand. The anticipation of a sentence's decay considers memory. Does a sentence exist if it's not being read? A pencil arrives. The departure of the space ahead of the next word. I don't know the joke exactly. I love you, she says, as the milk dribbles down my chin. I used to be ashamed of saying, I don't get it. Immortal soul. What an odd thought. I cannot die. To live forever, whether I want to or not. Clouds separate the winds into above, below. Existence is the fantasy of being. On a flatbed truck, the rear tire of a tractor is flat and the rubber's squished to one side, bulging like a distorted pancake. The hub of the wheel beneath gleams enough to shave in. Yellow chrysanthemums bound in a corner of a red pickup truck. Windshield wipers crush raindrops to the side. We stare at flowers not because of their beauty, but because they can look at the sun without going blind. An amulet of thin, stringy kelp with small pebbles webbed in the twist. Memory laughs at its autobiography. Both thumbs could be used for more than hitting the space bar. A partial list of friends. An orange afterglow wobbles in the window. The curtains open and shut like an elevator door. Eyelashes suck on a pillow like a popsicle. Pink blurs the tongue. Drenched socks squish as he walks across the room. Think of pale, papery flakes drifting to the dirt. delicate brown veins radiating from the kernel seed. Pods fall from a Chinese elm, mingling with the bristly stamens of a willow. Ice that was free last night cost $0.25 tonight. A syllable bites its way through air. Time is how many words you hear. I trim my beard for a scene in the film so that my face appears lopsided in the dream sequence. Then I shave it all the way off for the scene in which I sleep with my lover. Why did they have to cast someone with such big breasts? I like the sound of writing with a pencil. The ideal reading would have the sound of my writing this sentence playing in the background. The sound of the pencil would be far behind the sound of my voice by this point. By page 42, I barely would have finished 42 paragraphs, walking on wet sand, yellow seaweed at the border of high tide. A heavy wool sweater drums heat back into my body. The white on their bellies creases up their hind legs, right towards their butts. Black cows bend their heads and eat beside a tin shed. Doves and carob trees. What verb could do more than your imagination? 4 spiders, bellies toward dawn, on webs cupped between lantana twigs. Bill's favorite thirst quencher, fresh squeezed orange juice spiked with Poland spring water. I kissed her for a long time, and then she said, "Let's finish this." I wanted to ask her afterwards, "Did you know that was my first time?" I told the other actors I'd never taken any drugs. Peter said, "You've never taken acid?" "I've never taken any drugs," I said. Later, Peter told Susan, "Bill said he's never taken any drugs. He's probably taken so many, he thinks he hasn't taken any." A boxing glove tied to the trailer knob of a pickup's bumper. A slab of perforated paper beside the bus's exit. A combination lock clamped through steel cable on a bicycle rack, the chain derailed. Bourgeois grammar, hysterical vocabulary, criticism as a response to reputation, sentences that completely erase their verbs, even as their primary idea outlines the verb for death, language slowing down to tepid, creation as an imaginary space. Odysseus must be understood as a braggart, comic. Beginning quotation marks remind me of a southpaw's curveball. She won $6,000 cash in the pyramid scheme, wrapped it up in tinfoil and stashed it in the freezer of her refrigerator. If the house catches on fire, the money won't burn, or so she thinks. I couldn't finish the book. I couldn't even finish the first chapter. Jobs that grind the mind. The bus heaves up Hill Street. Drunks are hazing the driver. He gets on the phone, but that doesn't scare them. "Get off the bus and we'll see how tough you are," they taunt him. He mumbles, "This bus is barely running," and then I get them. Gas pedal floored, the bus edges along like a balloon with a slow leak. A large number of molecular clouds from a spiral arm that stretches for 30,000 light years. Ranging in distance from 30,000 to 40,000 light years from Earth, these clouds have not been seen before because observations have been concentrated in the flat extensions of the disk or plane of the Milky Way, an estimated diameter of 100,000 light years and a thickness of 15,000 light years. The stuntman didn't land on the X marked on the 40 by 15-foot airbag at the bottom of the Bronson Canyon quarry. Tiny white beads at the end of her braids tap the back of her suede jacket. My eyes are distracted by the rainbow arcs of black and red numbers intersected by columns on the counter scale a foot behind her. The beads go out of focus. How visible is the world if only a couple square feet are in focus at any given X of time? Radiant dimensions beget roofs. Flavor sinks into leftovers. Can unity exude sequence? Each word hired by the eye quits. Sponges and plastic bags thaw on forehead bumps. A premonition more specific than eventual repository. A barber blow dries cut hair along the rear of 6 chairs. Backseat weeds, red pods. Is the food always this good? Fortunately, only 1 hour left. Shod, trome, slip, bone. A drummer stood on a piano bench for the final bow. Coincidence replenishes back inside job burner, methodical foreigner. The illusion of minimum wage desecrates toil's proportions. The variable sentence laughs at intruders. Biscuit abyss, terrestrial breath. A crutch taps the ceiling lamp until its beam swivels onto scripts. Sequence extrudes a posture list. Fired words barge in, unable to pinpoint the exact location of tremors. The configuration of electric fields has been shown to correspond exactly to the visual shape of auroras. Like a breaching whale, a huge red column leaps into the crimson. As I walk near the low tide's lapping waves, the pearl gray cloud reflected on the wet sand accompanied me stride for stride. Shouldn't that cloud be reflected at only one point on the beach? Thank you very much, Harry. It's been a pleasure to have a chance to share this work with you on this program. And I like to think that some of the work I read today was really influenced by the work that you did in that book that I published, Enough, the Great Running Chapel, and the kind of freedom of imagination that you expressed in that collection.
I love your reading.
Thank you very much.
I love your reading, Bill. You gave a wonderful reading, and just to know the little things where we talk will be edited out.
Sure.
And so, what I saw in your work was a deep resonance, clarity, a superlative use of language, humor, surprise, strength of narrative, inventiveness, and rhythm. And I would just like that, you're a scholar, you know the tradition, but one thing I like about you, among many other things about your poetry, is that you're always trying, and you're not trying, but you're always making something new. And as you know, Pound said, make it new. And today we're in a time when everybody just says story, story, story. But you've always been a wonderful storyteller, but you've also experimented. And there aren't many people around anymore who have that sense of experimentation as was going on in the 70s when you were publishing Hickman and Prado, among others. So I appreciate that. And we have a few more minutes. What I would like to ask you is, something that's always a mystery to me, how someone puts together a prose poem. And as you know, Holly was excellent in the prose poem, and the French, their development of the prose poem and the symbolists and a little before that. But could you just talk about how you wrote the ball of tension from displacements?
Well, I think I'm glad you mentioned Holly's prose poems, because when one of the main ways I got to know her work and that her work caught my attention was because she was writing prose poems back at a point when the prose poem still wasn't that prominent in American poetry. People forget that in the early 1970s, only a handful of American poets really were writing prose poems, and Holly was among them. I still remember a piece of hers, I think, called Babies, that I published in Momentum magazine. And part of it is I think, as in the piece I just read, the freedom that the prose poem can give you to sort of shift dictions and move around at it's not about trying to create a consistent lyric eye, but it's looking at something from a number of different vantage points and moving from those point of views real rapidly. And it's also like film. It provides you, it's a kind of, I think cinema had a real impact on me in terms of writing that piece. There's a lot of references to cinema. And then towards the end there, I mentioned one about the stuntman missing the X, and that was actually based on an actual accident that I read about. And in fact, where I left off, I think there was a reference to the next part begins. He's a quick study, the producer said on the telephone. So I think part of what the prose poem does is sort of open up the door to a rather rapid sequence of images that just allows a wider discourse to enter the poem. I think that's part of it. hit a number of different registers. I like that about the prose poem very much, and the way that the sentence can be foregrounded. Sure. After all, lines basically exist in a poem to destabilize the sentence, but in a way, I sort of like the way that the sentence, the sentence in a prose poem has all the instability of a line, and yet doesn't quite sort of wobble so much at the same time. So it's kind of counterintuitive.
I love your work. You're a marvelous poet, and you've done so much for poetry. You're one of the great poets and scholars and producers, editors in Los Angeles. Your book, Holdouts, was the first, to my knowledge, of a comprehensive and very concise and insightful book on the history of poetry in LA. So I'm always grateful to you for that, and also obviously for the two books you published me, and for including me in your Momentum Mag, and also in the anthologies you've done. To me, the Poetry Loves Poetry, and also the one Bill just held up, The Streets Inside Los Angeles Poets, is, to my mind, the best anthology that ever came out of Los Angeles. And so, Bill Mohr, you're great, and I appreciate you coming on the show, and I appreciate your continuity and your work as we grow older in the poetry world. So I will always be grateful, and I will always admire and respect your work, not only as a poet, but as a scholar. So thank you, Bill Mohr.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you very much. An honor, truly, and a pleasure.
Our next poet is Bart Edelman. Bart Edelman's poetry collections include Crossing the Hackensack, Under Damaris's Dress, The Alphabet of Love, The Gentleman, The Last Mojito, The Geographer's Wife, Whistling to Trick the Wind, and This Body is Never at Rest, New and Selected Poems, 1993-2023. He has taught at Glendale College, where he edited Eclipse, a literary journal, and more recently in the MFA program at Antioch University, Los Angeles. His work has been widely anthologized in textbooks published by City Lights Books, Etruscan Press, Fountainhead Press, Harcourt Brace, Longman, McGraw-Hill, Prentice Hall, Simon & Schuster, Thomas/Heinley, the University of Iowa Press, Wadsworth, and others. He lives in Pasadena, California. Some of the themes in Bart's poetry are love, death, motion, inconstancy. His poetry is existential and personal. It also includes the larger world. Here's a marvelous poet, Bart Edelman.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Harry, Jennifer, Allegra. So glad to be reading with Bill. And I definitely want to thank Tracy and Lindsay at Meadowlark Press for publishing the new book, which is This Body is Never at Rest, New and Selected Work. I would like to begin with the title poem from my first book, Crossing the Hackensack. I grew up in Hackensack, New Jersey, on the banks of the Hackensack River. It wasn't like Mark Twain's Mighty Mississippi, but it did forecast what was ahead. And I would like to begin with that poem, Crossing the Hackensack. Crossing the Hackensack in dugout canoes, we lay low, crouched and confined, placid water rippling beneath us, silent paddles sweeping dreams below the shadowy surface. Long we drifted downriver in darkness, secrets safely stowed, courage our sole cargo. Closer and closer the banks became. Bravely we scanned treetops among the Teaneck timberland, searching for a sign of life, hoping to heed a sound, familiar, faint, awaiting welcoming Indians along the shore. Only the lone cricket's chirp met us floating towards land, our tired hands laden with gifts, clutching plastic trinkets and treasures, traders of a new age. Dawn pressed the water's edge, stirring us from restless slumber, humbling the sojourn we sought. Emptiness graced the ground. In either direction, space stretched from one end of the earth to the other, a canvas of desolation. If not for youthful wisdom, we might have remained there forever, huddled together, splinter to splinter, fighting off frost and morning dew, stuck with the vision of Geronimo. But slowly we retreated, homeward bound, pushing our paddles out from sludgy banks, embarking on safe passage. Crossing the Hackensack in dugout canoes, we sat erect, charting the course before us, waiting still, waiting still. The education we receive through life goes through many stages. Sometimes it's through a body of water, like the river. Sometimes it's a bit more personal. This is the title poem from the second book of mine. It's called Under Damaris's Dress. Under Damaris's dress, I crept that cold night to watch the crackling firelight burn between her legs. White winter snow dropped flakes against the window pane, and inside I remained to cross the orange lake. My trembling hands she covered, my wild eyes she closed. With only words that she would know, she taught me how to love her. We lay so near, the fear so far. I felt my life unfold. On silken sheets, in tents of gold, I caught a falling star. Her gentle touch, her soft caress, from these I must confess, I learned the art of tenderness under Damaris's dress. The next poem is from The Alphabet of Love. I don't know how many folks out there are familiar with the work of Nathaniel West, who was a wonderful writer who came out to Hollywood to write screenplays. He would later become famous for writing Miss Lonely Hearts, Day of the Locust, The Dream Life of Balzo Snell, and A Cool Million. He was married to S.J. Perlman's sister. And unfortunately, both he and Eileen, his wife, perished in a car accident. They were actually on the way back from Mexico. They had just been married. They were on a hunting trip, and they were going back to actually attend the funeral of F. Scott Fitzgerald. In one of the greatest literary tragedies I know of, they never made it back. This poem is called Day of the Locust, obviously off shift on Day of the Locust. A locust is a set of points employed to kind of prove a relationship between coordinates. This is Day of the Locust. Amid the discarded shards of hope, the twinkling glass shattered the roadway that cradled Route 111 and Route 80 in the palm of a giant unforgiving hand, which finally closed midway between Calexico and El Centro. There wasn't even a moment for them to say goodbye. Eileen's watch stopped to 2:55 on December 22nd, 1940, as she lay twisted in a ditch, while Nat toiled with his last breath, gasping on the asphalt. For both of them, time ceased to exist. Gone were the books, the hunting trips, and the children who would never be. The wedding dishes, still packed, lay at home in boxes as if they somehow knew destiny had no business eating breakfast. They had waited a lifetime for each other, and now West had failed to yield the right of way, ignoring the only glaring sign on that Sunday afternoon, trading his belief in the party dress for the politics of the open road, dangling behind the lethal wheel. And when it came to pass, it certainly wasn't the crash of the 30s that killed them, but a Pontiac sedan driven by a fruit tramp, whose hand West would have gladly shaken on any given night. For what ultimate purpose was the locus of fate formed, if not to crack the clock that bled drop by drop out along the lonely boulevard? Had the gods bothered to look down that cool winter day, they might have seen a million teeming dreams rising up just to meet them. The next poem is the title poem from The Geographer's Wife, which first appeared in the Flint Hills Review. Pity the poor geographer's wife, who spends most of her life missing him in every isthmus, desert, mountain, and valley he's had the pleasure to explore. He claims it's not his fault. The field takes him away, draws him east, west, north, and south at a moment's notice, often in the middle of the night, while she rises from their tiny bed and he packs a bag of silence only a secret can keep. He swears she knew about his desire, the longing to touch air, land, and sea, this need to leave a piece of himself wherever he can, survey the climatic conditions of an earth so vast he can barely comprehend it all. When she timidly asks upon each one of his returns how it is they cannot travel together, why he will not share his life's work, he struggles so with his words, she retreats to her bowl of yarn to darn yet another sock. Steady yourself for the week they have before his next departure. Ah, yes, pity the poor geographer's wife who watches the house grow more and more around her each day. I know, like Bill, I taught for many, many years. This is another poem from The Geographer's Wife. I think those of us who teach creative writing and literature form a bond with our students that sometimes is intimate for the student to reveal something that moves you to such a degree. This is called Girls Like Linka. Girls like Linka pin their hair to the wind, 10 strands at a time, when the first sign of trouble threatens to overtake them. Girls like Linka dream of nothing but boys who know how to cruise up and down the cruel avenues, littering their lives. Girls like Linka behave badly at parties their mothers make them attend, if only to raise suspicion, so they will not be invited again. Girls like Linka turn away from their fathers at that time of month, wishing the moon was a stranger with a spare cigarette. Girls like Linka love no one but themselves, always dressed in black, each day a service, every night a funeral. All right, I'm going to read a series of poems that are from the new book. And the new book has 45 or 46, I believe, new poems, and then 15 or 20 poems from each of the previous 7 books. This was first published in Arlington Literary Journal, and it is the title poem, This Body is Never at Rest. This body is never at rest, for reasons I now suspect. for what it may portend, for where the next breath leads, for steps of jubilant agony. This body is never at rest, although it yearns for repair, although an avalanche awaits, although the Holy Spirit is asleep, although the universe cries foul. This body is never at rest, despite forgetting its last name, despite working around the clock, despite a simple state of decency, despite the hatchet in its back pocket. This body is never at rest, hence the clarion call to arms, hence a thought in a glass bottle, hence each muscle at mid-twitch, hence no date of expiration. This body is never at rest because the morning is an uncoiled string, because the afternoon pays no taxes, because the evening needs a shadow, because this body says so. It's amazing the daily rituals we do, what they provide for us in terms of sourcing out what life is about. Sometimes doing laundry brings us closer to some truth. This poem is called Raven. Today, sorting laundry, I found a dazed raven, half asleep in my pocket. Poor thing appeared haggard, told me he hadn't enjoyed a moment's rest in ages. It surely seemed the case. The bird recited metric verse the entire afternoon, claimed he was a union member, but then it all went to snot. He was now disenfranchised, out of work, out of money, and still had hungry mouths left to feed in a nest somewhere south of Baltimore. It made me weep, I'll admit. However, late for supper, I placed him gently in the dryer, set the cycle to permanent press, wished him all the best I could, and then got on with my life. Another poem from the new collection. It's called I'm Fine. And I think we always need to hear someone tell us we're fine, some recognition each day that somewhere in the utter chaos tells us we're okay. I'm fine. My brother tells me I'm pretty. My sister tells me I'm plain. My husband tells me I'm fine. My mother tells me I'm thin. My mirror tells me I'm fat. My husband tells me I'm fine. My friends tell me I'm smart. My boss tells me I'm stupid. My husband tells me I'm fine. My doctor tells me I'm healthy. My monthly tells me I'm sick. My husband tells me I'm fine. My beautician tells me I'm open. My shrink tells me I'm closed. My husband tells me I'm fine. My Lexus tells me I'm rich. My bank book tells me I'm poor. My husband tells me I'm fine. My pastor tells me I'm saved. My God tells me I'm damned. My husband tells me I'm fine. I'd like to read, three more poems. This is a poem I'd like to read for my wife, Kim. It's called How I Came to You. Bankrupt, petty, poor, without a drop of honey coursing through my veins. The ire from another life I let in slow motion. When my soul departed the moment I turned away to scowl at the stars. Aimless, shiftless, stuck, in nothing except the mire I could not escape, but grew to embrace. Because once you wear the cloak of loneliness, day in and day out, you don't know how else to dress. Admit, permit, submit, vows I refused to keep until I came to you and heard you reveal them for the first time. This gift, a blessing to free me from myself. Often I think about the last word, both literally and symbolically. What will it say? Where will it take us? How to hear the last word? I think of the last word, when it will be written, how it may possibly sound, what the meaning shall convey. And I wonder, perchance, if I can measure its weight by the length of a feather yesterday's sparrow left behind on the path to my loft and the house I call home. I ponder what time remains, troubling me now and then, yet I know not to stop for fear I'll be unable to start the process again, distinguish winter from spring, turn summer towards fall, just the sort of mutation I sense could haunt me in doubt's final moments. Archbishop Anthony Bloom concedes the proper response to love is to accept it. There is nothing to do. So too must it follow. This slow work I practice, painstaking at its every letter, a crawl towards the light I find in a dark corner, waiting to address the night. And the last poem I'm going to read is called In Heaven. I read it at a day of poetry in LA that Lynn Thompson, the LA poet laureate, put together. I guess now it's almost a year and a half ago. It was a wonderful, wonderful event. This was first published in the San Pedro Review, thanks to Jeff and Toby Altier. In Heaven. In heaven, they know your work. Catalog every poem you've written. Commit them to memory forevermore. Bradbury and you huddle together over a steaming cup of Java, discussing relevant issues each morning, giggling until the afternoon releases you to destiny's retreat. How sublime are the clouds buttoning up the universe below, telling you it's all been worth the journey to reach the celestial home you'll never need leave again. Tomorrow, Twain shall come calling. He enjoys his billiards and bourbon, not necessarily in that order. Frost will soon follow next week, partial to easy wind and downy flake, arriving atop his splendid little horse. Bob's always good for a serious chat, no longer rushed by daily matters, nary a promise to keep. It's a jolly good life here indeed. You can still write now and then when thoughts sneak up on you like visits from long lost friends. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bart. I love the clarity in your poetry, your sense of morality, the connectedness, the vulnerability. You're an empathetic, you have empathy in your poetry. And also the last poem was lovely. Your book, the title or part of the title of your book, the selected poems, This Body Is Never at Rest. Never at rest. You have a searching soul. and the motion and inconstancy, as we've talked about before, is obviously evident. So I just want to congratulate you on all your excellent work. Bill Mohr, why don't you come on and each of you can say something about each other's poetry if you're still there. Bill, Bill,
Yeah.
you have like four minutes left. Why don't each one of you, you're both teachers, you're both erudite in poetry, and let's start with Bart and say a few words about Bill Mohr's poetry that you heard today, and then take a minute or so, and then Bill, do the same with you. It'd be interesting to see what you both hear and see. Bart?
Sure. I've read Bill's work for years, and I first want to say that I appreciate the honesty in his work. I appreciate the way that I loved all the images that were in the longer piece that he read. I certainly know from his writing that Bill obviously has never done any drugs whatsoever. No, I love that, and I love the questioning. I love the satire that was in that longer piece. I would love to hear more of his work, and certainly more about LA and the whole transition. I mean, I didn't come to LA until almost 1980. And I would just love to hear more and more about how he thinks in terms of the Mecca that LA has always been. But aside from that, and that's probably time for a drink or a dinner or something like that. I appreciate the way he reads, and there is, to me, a soulful quality in terms of the way he takes a subject, as he did in that longer work, and just made me feel as if I were sitting there with him and listening and being part of the Bill Mohr's world.
Yeah. Well, before Bill speaks,
thank you.
I may, Bill, is look at Bill's blog. I mean, he's written about LA and beyond for many years on his excellent blog. So Bill can talk to you more about that if you want.
Just one thing, Bill, weren't we both in Interlit Q, David Garion?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's where I also, yes.
Yeah, David Garion's.
Yes, he was my student. And was he your student as well?
Yes, at Cal State.
In Long Beach.
Yes.
Exactly.
He got his MFA here. I did not. I knew that he grew up in Glendale.
Yes.
Yes, so that would make sense that
we published him in Eclipse. We had him read at the Ruskin, in LA.
Right.
Oh, he's a sweetheart, and he's
a terrific poet.
Yes, he is.
He's living in Italy now, and I think more or less permanent exile. But you certainly gave him a great start because he was already pretty fully developed as a poet, and I think he owes that to working with you. When he arrived here, he wasn't like a lot of early young poets. Right. He was already well underway, so you got him off to a great start. But I had no idea that we had that connection of a common student. I wanted to say, in the little time we have it, I can never resist this. When I realized that I was really curious about how many libraries the geographer's wife was in, and I looked up on WorldCat and I saw that you pulled off. It's not that easy to get a book of poems into a lot of dozens of libraries. That's in over 5 dozen libraries, and I really hope that your next book even gets in even more libraries. But you should be really proud of that. That's really a tough market these days.
Thank you.
I know that was 10 years ago, but you should. But I want to comment in particular on this Body at Rest. That's really one of the finest poems around. And if that poem doesn't get into a lot of anthologies, then people are just simply not reading what's in front of them. The rhythm of that piece, the wit of it, the way it moved around. I even started typing some lines on my screen when you said this body is never at rest. Each muscle at each mid twitch, I think it was.
Mhm.
You know, that
Yes.
when you went mid twitch, I just thought of that's how your poems and the way those individual words are oscillating with each other is you catch each poem at that moment of the synapse itself, the mid twitch, not before, not after. You're writing the twitch of the wave as it breaks. And that poem in particular was like watching a masterful surfer just to shoot the curl. I really want to, I really enjoyed a lot of the tenderness in your poems and the way you were able to portray the needs and thoughts of other people in your poems. And in a way, I would point to the influence of Frost there. I even heard you with a reference to Frost in one of your poems with the easy, I think it was
Easy Wind and Downy Flake.
Easy Wind and Downy Flake, right? So it was great to hear you read. I'm so grateful to you, Harry, for pairing both of us up. This is it was nice, of course, with you to be with you at that Lynn Thompson event, but so much nicer to have an extended run of poems and to be paired up like this. So thank you for joining me today, Bart.
Right back at you, Bill.
Thank you both, Bill Mohr and Bart Edelman. We have to go to our next show that they're going to do. But before we go, I just want to say next Tuesday, John Towie, a brilliant actor, will present once again the poetry of the great neo-formalist Richard Wilbur. And he has it all memorized and he talks about it. They had a relationship. And this is, I think he was born in 1921. His birthday is March 1st. So this will be a couple days after that. But thank you once again, Bart Edelman and Bill Mohr. And here's our wonderful director, Jennifer Clymer.
Guys, that was amazing. Being a fellow Jerseyite, I felt the Hackensack River. I love that. Please join us again next week because John is incredible in his presentation of Richard Wilbur, and he's going to be doing it live from the stage. So we'll have the stage all set up. It'll be beautiful cameras, and it's going to be a wonderful time. Harry, that will be your 190th episode.
Wow.
Thanks
We got to figure out what we're doing for the 200th. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Thank you for encouraging me to do a poetry show. This show began when COVID hit in March 2020, and Jennifer, being the director of MPTF Studios, started doing 4 days a week of live shows. This isn't the only show, so I'm always thankful to her. So thank you once again, Bart Edelman, Bill Mohr, and Jennifer Clymer.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Jennifer.
guys.
Thank you.